My sister fired me the moment she became president of our hotel chain. She did not even hesitate. One minute, I was in my office reviewing occupancy projections, and the next, I was being told by Human Resources that my position had been terminated effective immediately. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a formality, some internal reshuffling that would be corrected by the end of the day, but it was not. And I knew it the second I saw her signature on the paperwork. Her pen strokes were always rigid, tight, as if she was trying to prove something with every letter. She had signed off on it herself. My name is Victor. For almost 16 years, I was the chief operating officer of our family's hotel chain, a position I earned, not inherited. I say that because in family businesses the lines get blurry. Titles can be handed out like birthday cards. But that was not the case with me. I worked my way through the ranks. Front desk, facilities, guest services, finance. I understood every inch of how the business worked because I lived it. My sister, on the other hand, was a different story. She was not incompetent, not by any stretch. She had degrees from places that carried weight in certain rooms. She spoke the language of investors. She dressed like a magazine cover and moved like she was always 10 minutes ahead of the room. People listened when she walked in, but what she never quite grasped, or maybe chose not to, was the pulse of the operation. The things you cannot read in a spreadsheet. The way certain regional managers built trust with local vendors. The subtle differences in customer expectations between the desert resorts and the coastal properties. The mechanics of hospitality are invisible to most people until they break. I made it my job to keep those mechanics humming. When she was named president, I congratulated her, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect. It is not easy to step into a position like that, especially when the eyes of the entire family and board are on you. I had no reason to suspect what would happen next. It started with a memo. 3 days into her presidency, she sent out a corporate-wide memo stating that a strategic realignment was underway. Buzzwords. Every industry has them. I had seen enough of these to know that they usually preceded layoffs or restructuring. But again, I did not worry. I had just finished overseeing a successful international expansion project that brought in a 12% revenue increase quarter over quarter. Our occupancy rate was the highest it had been in 7 years. The next morning, my keycard stopped working. I tried the executive entrance. Red light. I walked around to the main lobby, where the receptionist looked at me with the kind of nervous expression people wear when they know something you do not. She picked up the phone and spoke quietly into the receiver. Then she nodded. "Someone from Human Resources will meet you in conference room B," she said. I nodded, said nothing, just walked. The room was already occupied. One HR manager I recognized, another I did not. A sealed envelope sat on the table. They did not say much. They did not need to. Effective immediately, the letter began. No performance review, no misconduct, no transition period. Just a paragraph of legal phrasing that ended with the words, "best interests of the company." I asked one question. Was this her decision? The woman across from me hesitated for half a second. Just long enough to confirm everything. She signed off on it personally. I remember staring at the envelope, the thick weight of it. It felt heavier than it should have, like it contained more than just paper. It felt like a message. Not just a firing, but a severing. I stood up, thanked them, and left the building. It would have been easy to call her, or storm into her office, but I did not. There are moments when silence says more than confrontation. I wanted to understand the full picture before I said a word. The next few days were strange. No emails, no calls, no explanations, just silence. From everyone, What bothered me most was not the firing itself, it was how clinical it all was. How she did not even have the decency to face me. We had built this thing together, not as co-founders, but as siblings who spent decades watching our parents grow a modest two-property operation into a nationwide hotel chain. We watched our father fix leaky toilets in the early days. Our mother personally wrote thank you notes to returning guests. We grew up in lobbies and linen rooms. I gave the company everything I had. Missed birthdays, lost relationships, canceled vacations, all for the sake of growth, of expansion, of standards. And now I was out. Not with dignity, not with acknowledgement, just a line in a spreadsheet she could delete. What I did not realize at the time was that this was not just about a realignment. It was personal. I got my first real clue 2 weeks later. A friend of mine, someone from finance, called me from a private number. "She's scrapping your multi-property integration plan," he said. That hit hard. The integration plan had been in the works for over a year. A digital ecosystem that would unify our reservation, CRM, and property management systems into one streamlined platform. It had taken countless hours, countless meetings, vendor negotiations, and pilot testing in 3 key markets. The rollout was set to begin in 90 days. "She says it is outdated," he added. "Wants to bring in a tech firm she worked with in New York." I knew exactly what was happening. She was cleaning house, rewriting the narrative. She wanted her presidency to start on a clean slate, her slate. I sat with that for a while. It would have been easy to feel bitter, to send out a press release, to call board members. But I did none of that. Instead, I went back to the data, my personal files, notes, reports, vendor contracts. I wanted to understand what she was trying to erase and why. And that is when I saw it. Buried in one of the vendor agreements was a clause I had pushed for during negotiations that granted me intellectual ownership of the integration framework I had developed. It was a safeguard. Not because I anticipated being fired, but because I knew how critical that system would become. I had spent over a decade in operational strategy. I had seen companies collapse because they built their infrastructure on vendor-owned platforms with no leverage. I was not going to let that happen on my watch. So I had drafted the agreement to give the company usage rights, but not ownership. The system, its architecture, and its operational design were legally mine, and she had just terminated the person holding the keys. At first, I thought about calling her, offering to license it, play it diplomatically, but something about her silence, about how deliberately she had cut me out, made me pause. She wanted control, not collaboration, so I waited. 3 weeks after my termination, she unveiled the new digital integration plan at a shareholder meeting. She announced a multi-million-dollar partnership with a tech firm that promised seamless onboarding and cutting-edge guest personalization. I watched it online. Her presentation was polished, confident, visionary. The room clapped. Investors smiled. But I knew something she did not. That system was a shell. It lacked the structural compatibility with half our legacy properties. The pilot markets I had tested revealed key issues that would take months to resolve, none of which were accounted for in this new rollout. And then came the emails. First from site managers, then from regional directors, then from clients. The system was failing. Overbookings, guest profile mismatches, integration errors with payment processors. One by one, the cracks began to show. Still, I said nothing. Until I received a call. Not from her, but from someone else. A long-standing investor. One I had known for years. "She looks overwhelmed," he said. "No one knows where to go. I think she underestimated the scope of what you built." That was the moment I knew. She had tried to erase my work, not because it was broken, but because it reminded her of the one thing she could not control, me. So I made a choice. Not to return, not to confront, but to build. It was not about revenge. That would have been too simple, too small. No, what I wanted was something different. I wanted clarity. I wanted distance. And more than anything, I wanted to prove to myself that what I had built for them, I could build again without them. It started quietly. I moved out of the city, rented a modest apartment about an hour away from headquarters, and spent my mornings walking along the harbor before the world woke up. I needed to unlearn the chaos. I needed my brain to stop operating in emergency response mode. I had been on autopilot for years. Always a meeting, a call, a crisis. I had forgotten what stillness felt like. And in that stillness, ideas began to surface. Not grand ideas, just fragments. Notes on napkins. Diagrams on the back of receipts. Concepts for small boutique hospitality models, rooted in what I had learned from decades inside the machinery. What made people feel welcome? What made them return? What no algorithm could replicate. I had no interest in building another chain. That game was crowded, loud, and increasingly political. What I saw instead was a gap, an opening where technology and intimacy could actually work together, not compete. One morning, over a black coffee and a quiet sunrise, I drafted the first blueprint, a micro-hospitality model. Properties under 40 rooms, each with personalized, data-driven guest experiences built from pre-visit interaction. Not just loyalty programs, but genuine feedback loops. Every room would adapt to a guest's preferences based on real behavior, not assumptions. The technology would work quietly in the background, but the human side, the service, the culture, the intuition, would remain at the forefront. I knew exactly what was missing in modern hospitality, because I had spent 16 years watching executives try to replace instinct with dashboards. You cannot quantify warmth, but you can design systems that support it. I gave the project a name, Haven. I started calling in favors. Quiet ones. Developers, interior specialists, former colleagues who had quietly distanced themselves from the chain after my departure. Not because they were loyal to me, but because they understood what was happening on the inside, the turbulence, the confusion, the slow collapse under polished press releases. I did not ask for money, I asked for time. Input, honest feedback. I listened more than I talked. Meanwhile, I watched from a distance, as the hotel chain we built together began to fray at the edges. Guest reviews dipped. A series of system outages made headlines in trade publications. One of our flagship properties experienced a data breach, minor, but enough to cause panic. My sister remained poised, publicly at least. She gave interviews, doubled down on tech integration, announced more partnerships. But I could see it. Behind her eyes during that quarterly video address to staff, something was slipping. Then came the call I did not expect. From our uncle, a man who had served on the board since our father's passing. He had always stayed neutral, respected the boundaries, but this time he was direct. "She is in over her head," he said. "She is trying to steer a ship she does not know how to sail." I said nothing. "She will not ask for help," he added. "Too much pride, too many promises made." I still said nothing. I needed him to say what he was really thinking. "She is going to lose the board. If the next quarter looks like this one, she is finished." That was the moment I realized something deeper. It was never just about her being president. It was about proving something to our father, to herself, maybe even to me. She had always wanted to lead, and I'd always wanted to protect the work. But those two wants had finally collided. I thanked him for the call, told him I wished her well, and meant it, because by then I was already in motion. Haven had a location, a small, aging property just outside Santa Fe, nothing glamorous, but the bones were good. I bought it under a holding company, quietly, hired a local team, renovated one room at a time. We launched with 12 rooms, no fanfare, no press release, no ribbon cutting, just a website, a waiting list, and a promise. We remember your name, your preferences, and your peace. We booked out within the first week. The reviews started pouring in, not from influencers, but from real guests. Business travelers, retirees, solo artists, people who were tired of being treated like a number. Word spread, and within 3 months our occupancy rate was higher than any property I had ever managed. One evening, while reviewing guest feedback over dinner, my phone buzzed. It was her. I stared at the screen for a moment, let it ring 4 times before I picked up. She did not say hello, just, "Why are you doing this?" There was no anger in her voice, just exhaustion. "Doing what?" I asked, knowing exactly what she meant. "You could have come back. I would have found a place for you. You are intentionally undercutting everything I am trying to fix." "I did not undercut anything," I said calmly. "You fired me. I moved on. That is how the world works." Silence. Then she said something I did not expect. "You always made it look easy, holding things together. I did not realize how much you were carrying." I let the silence hang. "Why did you not fight back?" she asked. "Because I knew what it would cost, to both of us." She exhaled, the kind of breath that carries years of friction. "I thought I had to be different," she said finally. "New, better." "You could have been," I replied, "but not by erasing everything that came before you." The call ended with no resolution, just truth, hanging quietly between us like a photograph neither of us wanted to take down. A week later, I was contacted by a private hospitality investor who had stayed at Haven anonymously. He wanted in, not to buy, to expand, with full operational autonomy left to me. I turned him down, not because I did not want to grow, but because I was not done proving, to myself, not to her, that there was another way. 2 more Haven properties followed in the next year. One in the Pacific Northwest, one in New England, each with different themes, rooted in the natural surroundings, but identical in their ethos. Meanwhile, the hotel chain's stock dipped, then flatlined. Investors started pulling out. The new systems were abandoned. The board voted to install an interim president, someone external. She resigned quietly. No press conference, no statement. I found out from a former colleague who texted me a link to the internal memo. No bitterness, just a simple line. She is out. I didn't hear from her for almost a year. Not after her resignation, not after the board replaced her. Not even after the media ran their usual cycle of polite speculation and quiet forgetfulness. In the corporate world, exits like hers happen quietly, like lights dimming in a room no one's watching. But I thought about her often, not in bitterness, in memory. We had built something real once. That hotel chain wasn't just business, it was our inheritance, not in the financial sense, but the emotional one. Our father built it from nothing, and we, his children, had tried to carry it forward in very different ways. She chased transformation. I chased continuity, and maybe had we seen that sooner, none of this would have happened. But hindsight doesn't change the past. It only gives us context. Haven was thriving. The 3rd property had opened just outside Burlington, Vermont, an adaptive reuse project in a restored brick textile mill by the river. Local materials, local staff, an aesthetic that felt authentic without trying too hard. It wasn't luxury, it was intention. And that's what people came for. Our customer satisfaction metrics weren't just high, they were personal. Return visits doubled within 6 months. Word of mouth was our only marketing engine, and it ran better than any campaign I'd managed in my previous life. Still, there was a question I hadn't been able to answer yet. What now? I had built something better than what we had before. Not bigger, but better, tighter, clearer, and the numbers backed it up. I had no desire to grow beyond 10 properties. Scale can become its own kind of cancer if you're not careful. But even with 3 full properties and another 2 in design, I wasn't chasing growth anymore. I was chasing meaning, and oddly enough, it came back to her. It was a cold morning in January when I found her email. It had been sent to my personal inbox, the one very few people used. Subject line, "If you have a moment." I read it twice before I even realized I was holding my breath. "Victor, I'm writing because I've spent a year thinking about what happened. Not the board, not the numbers. United States. I thought becoming president would make me whole. It didn't. All it did was show me how much I still needed to learn and how little I understood about what made it all work when you were running things. You were the balance. I was the drive. I thought I could replace your presence with systems and strategies. But what I really did was remove the soul from the place. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to tell you, I'm proud of what you've built. I stayed at your Santa Fe property last fall. I didn't check in under my name. I just wanted to see it for what it was, and it was beautiful. Not just the place, the feeling. I hadn't felt that in a hotel in years. You did what I couldn't. You built something people want to come back to, not just once, but over and over. I don't want anything, just thank you for what you built and for what you reminded me of. Sister. It hit me harder than I expected. I closed the laptop and just sat with it for a while. There was no apology, not in the traditional sense, but there didn't need to be. Her words were clean, sincere, unembellished, and for someone like her, I knew how much effort that required. The next day I replied, "You weren't wrong to want something different, but the foundation wasn't broken, it just needed care. I wish we could have figured that out together, but I'm glad you saw what Haven is. It's not just a brand, it's a second chance at getting it right. If you ever want to talk, not as rivals, not as former executives, but as siblings who once dreamed the same dream, my door's open. Victor." 3. Days later, she showed up in person. No driver, no press, just her, standing outside the Vermont property with a coffee in one hand and an apology in her eyes. She hadn't changed much on the surface. Still sharply dressed, still composed, but softer, quieter, like something had settled inside her. We walked through the hotel together. I let her see it through her own eyes, didn't guide, didn't narrate. At the end of the tour, she asked one question. "How do you teach this to someone else?" I smiled. "You don't teach it, you protect it." We sat in the lounge for over an hour. No business talk, no blame, just conversation. Stories from childhood. Moments from our years in the company we had avoided speaking of. She shared how the board meetings had become a minefield, how the culture had turned cold, how she had gone from leader to figurehead in less than a year. "I was fighting ghosts," she said, "trying to be different than Dad, than you, than everything that came before. And I was just trying to keep it from falling apart," I admitted. For the first time, we weren't defending our choices. We were sharing them. When she finally stood to leave, she paused. "If you ever expand again," she said quietly, "and you need someone to run operations, someone who's learned what not to do, I'd be open." I didn't answer immediately. I looked at her. and I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: humility. Not weakness, just the calm that follows a storm. I reached out, shook her hand, not out of formality, but ceremony. "Let's start with coffee," I said. "Then we'll see." She smiled. "Fair enough." 6 months later, we co-launched a new Haven property together, this one in northern Michigan. A lakeside retreat, small and seasonal, focused on writers and thinkers. She led operations, quietly, no spotlight, and she flourished. Her strength had always been in building structure, in moving pieces. But now she moved with respect, for the guest, for the staff, and for the story behind every wall. We didn't talk about the past often. We didn't need to. Because every clean check-in, every returning guest, every team meeting that ended in laughter instead of dread, that was our closure. We had taken the long way back to something good, not perfect, not how we imagined it as kids, but real. And maybe, in the end, that's the only legacy that matters. Not the number of rooms or the size of the stock price, but the rooms people remember, the ones they return to not because they have to, but because they want to, because something about it feels like peace.